Kara Shalom, welcome to our watercolor journey. First of all, I want to say a really big thank you to all of you who are supporting us so generously. It is a wonderful experience to share our journey with you. Well, in today's landscape, we are going to focus on a few things. We will use masking fluid to preserve some white areas, and we will have a quick look at perspective and finally how to give your trees a bit more dimension. The materials used are listed in the description below. On the palette we have a very interesting mix. We have Aussie Red Gold, Quinacridone Magenta, Phthalo Blue Red Shade and Sepia. We also have a series of premixes, starting with a grey mix from Phthalo Blue and Sepia, then an orange mix from Aussie Red Gold and Quin Magenta, a purple mix from Quin Magenta and Phthalo Blue, a green mix of Aussie Red Gold and Phthalo Blue, and finally an olive green mix from Aussie Red Gold, Phthalo Blue and Sepia. Make a simple drawing of a few buildings and trees with a few lines on the right to resemble a ploughed field. Keep the perspective in mind. Parallel lines seem to converge in the distance. The horizon line is about 2/3 down the paper. The focus in this painting is on the middle ground. Look at the angle of the buildings and the balance created with a larger tree on the right. Balancing your composition is an important aspect of a successful painting. The paper is on a block and it is taped with masking tape to create a border. Use some masking fluid to cover the areas you want to preserve. Rub an old brush or masking fluid brush over a bar of wet soap and then gently dab it on a paper towel to get rid of the excess soap. Then dip the pen in the masking fluid and paint it onto your surface. Masking fluid dries fairly quickly, so plan where you want to add it. You can pour a bit of fluid into a small bowl or use it directly from the container. You can add some to the windows and the bushes and the tree trunks in the background. Use your own discretion, but don't overdo it. You don't need to paint thick lines either. Just a tiny bit of fluid will do the trick. Make sure to wash the brush immediately after you've used it. And also use an old brush. Masking fluid can really ruin a good brush. Allow the masking fluid to dry completely. It should take a few minutes. Test for dryness by lightly pressing it with your finger. It should feel a bit tacky, but should not adhere to your finger. If you are in a hurry, you can use a hairdryer on a cool setting, but it's not really the best thing to do. Be patient. Have a cup of coffee and relax. Once the fluid is dry, you can wet the entire paper with a Hake or a large mop. Use a large brush and add Phthalo Blue to the top of the sky area. Allow it to blend with the water on the paper. Add touches of the grey mix to give a bit of variation in the sky. For this painting, we will paint around the tree and the roofs of the houses. Rinse the brush and add a touch of Aussie Red Gold to the tree's dry surface, and then immediately add a dab of green to it and allow it to blend on its own. Add light touches of purple just above the tree line of the houses, and then use the orange, gold and greens to fill in the horizon line and the background. You can also add this to the foreground. You have to work quite fast as all this needs to be done wet on wet. Brush your colors lightly with broad strokes into the foreground and allow it to blend by itself to create soft edges and very smooth transitions. Use the sepia and then green to add lines to the plowed field. Remember the perspective lines, narrow at the back and wider apart near the front. By now the middle ground has settled and the paper should be somewhat damp, not soaking wet anymore. You can use a smaller brush and add another layer of foliage and bushes to the background. Use the colors on the palette to bring variation. Keep in mind that the cooler colors will push the bushes further away and the warmer colors will bring the elements forward. Work lightly and try to keep a bit more control over your brush work here. Practice some negative painting by adding the greens around the houses. You will notice that there, where you have placed the masking fluid, you have patches where the paint is repelled. Don't labor over these areas, as you don't want the paint to lie in pools on top of the masking fluid. It might not dry properly and then smudge when you remove the gum. Add some detail to the houses, like the windows and the doors. Add some darker color to the plowed fields for the shadows. Use a rigger or a thin brush to add the tree trunks and branches. Add the first layer of color to the houses. You can choose any color and add some others from the palette for some variety. Keep in mind the direction of the light. The far side of your elements should be the shadow side and should therefore be a bit darker. Use the belly of your brush and some greens to add more prominent foliage to the left side of the tree. The sun is coming from the right in this painting, so that side is a bit diffused and the darker side is more detailed. You can dab the brush on a paper towel to get rid of excess paint and then lightly brush the belly onto the area to create the foliage. Use the different greens and add a touch of orange for variation. Do the same with the other trees. Vary the colors of the trees to create interest. Build the dimension in the trees by adding patches of darker color. You can add tiny amounts of water to help the paint spread if you want softer edges. The softer edges help to give your trees a more 3D look. Allow the painting to dry completely. Do not attempt to remove the masking fluid while the painting is still wet, as it will smear the paint all over the place and ruin your hard work. Once it's dry, you can use your finger or a rubber cement eraser to remove the gum. Don't rub too hard. Gently rub the eraser or your finger over the gum and it should lift easily without tearing the paper. Make sure to clean off all the residue. Now you can use a thin brush to add some more details. Take care to preserve the whites created by the masking fluid. The focus is on the middle ground, so you don't want to do too much to the foreground. Add a few strokes of green and yellow near the white area and blend some of it in with water. Again, keep it simple. You want to preserve much of the softness and transparency of the foreground. Bring a little bit of the purple and the blue into the foreground to tie the sky and terrain together. By using the masking fluid to preserve the white of the paper, you now have beautiful contrasts and values. The light and dark areas in your painting contrast nicely with each other. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon. Vaya con Dios.